Well, what a great turnout, and I know it's that popcorn that I love so much that just got everyone in here. And I want to thank everyone for coming to what I think will be another phenomenal part of our planning process that we will call FutureVU. And I'll just say a few words, mostly just to say how great Eric and his team are for building what I think is a very, very inclusive, values-driven, engaging, transparent process of shared governance across the institution. Working with faculty, working with staff, working with alumni, working with students, and really trying to come together as a community to say, why are we here? What do we stand for? What are our values? And then to really translate that into a plan, not in the sense of, oh, this is the plan, and we just sit in a room and say, you can't do that, it violates the plan. But really kind of always keeping us pointing kind of in the direction of our values and stewarding our land and taking account of the environment around us. And then really, as we build, as we design, as we sustain, as we include, really always being careful that whatever we lay on the campus is very much attuned to our mission and our values. I think Eric and everyone today has a number of things that we really want to talk about, and but everything is always, you know, free to question. If you don't like the brick that's going on a building, Eric's happy to answer. Why is that brick going on that building? Or, you know, I love the crab orchard stone. Maybe you should put it on the other side. Whatever the questions and comments are. I think there are a number of things we really want to talk about today, and Eric will always restate the core values. The first thing I think is a very, very important one that I want to mention, which is accessibility. And it really is a fundamental right to me that everybody who is invited to be part of our community is included equally and fully in the participation of everything at the university. And I think we as a society, we as a university, have a long way to go to say we have been truly enlightened about the physical and psychological barriers that we inadvertently or even intentionally with reckless, you know, just kind of not even focusing on it, put in front of people. And I think the one thing we have to keep in mind is that as more people question, well, why didn't this have this entryway, or why did you design the stairs there? Why is the loading dock there? That we should see that as a positive sign. We should see it as a positive sign that our society and Vanderbilt are really starting to say, we're open and we want to include everybody. And we know that as our community changes, and it's rapidly changing in front of our eyes, I think in a much more beautiful, diverse, inclusive way, that we have to understand that being invited into the community is not the same as full participation. And so I think issues of accessibility and full opportunities on the campus for each and every person remain a paramount goal. I think another thing that we'll kind of return back to is, of course, my favorite topic of transportation. Unfortunately, we have a lot of transportation experts on campus, and some people who are experts have opinions as well. And, you know, it usually kind of focuses on a 10 by 12-foot thing with yellow lines. And we have kind of invited conversations about really tough topics, which include parking. And I think as a university, we want to be very attuned to, we're a leader, we're not a follower. You know, if people are talking about autonomous vehicles and smart cars and, you know, these things, we can't be the caboose. we have to be the engine. We have to be the engine. The issue of transportation to me is central to issues of sustainability and our carbon footprint. And, you know, I think in an odd twist, not in my backyard, a lot of ideas about sustainability don't look in the mirror. A lot of questions about our own carbon footprint deal with choices that we make every day. I'm always, Eric will talk about this, you know, probably 1/4 of our land is parking. And when people say, what does parking cost? I always say, well, do you want to put the value of the land in there? Well, we don't need to do that. It's like, oh, really? So you think I can grow land in a petri dish? Land is our kind of most precious thing. We're not going anywhere. And so we have to have, you know, really, really good discussions about the future. So I think issues of kind of accessibility, I think transportation and sustainability are very much on the top of our list today. And I just couldn't be happier with the multitude of opinions and viewpoints and really Eric's broad approach to a values-driven FutureVU. So, Eric, take it over. Thanks so much.
All right, thanks, Nick, for that great introduction. And I want to thank everybody from the community who came here today. Just looking around the room, I see a wide range of faculty, staff, and students. And I'll just say right at the front end, one of the real joys for me personally, being part of the Vanderbilt community and having the opportunity to work on FutureVU, is seeing in action the collaboration that happens so magically here and that really defines Vanderbilt. So many people from the community have really engaged proactively and in such a helpful way around everything we're going to talk about today and more. So to begin, as the Chancellor stated, we really have three things in mind to focus on today: accessibility, mobility and transportation, and sustainability. All three of these topics are absolutely foundational to our aspirations for a beautiful, sustainable, park-like campus as we look far into the future about VU and its most precious resource beyond its people, its land, and its facilities. So let me just step back here. I'm not going to read these quotes, but this is, I think, a wonderful example at the top of our Chancellor, really just standing up at a town hall we've had almost 2 years ago now and articulating something that is really critically important. A lot of people have said to me, what is a campus land use plan? What does that mean? And to me, it's really a blueprint for the development of the campus tethered to and in support of our academic, research, teaching, and innovation goals as a community. So how do we create the physical environments, the landscapes, the places that really emanate and embody our values as a campus? We've had the opportunity throughout this process to work with some really terrific third-party consultants and planners, including Pelly Clark Pelly, led by the well-known architect Cesar Pelly. And if you haven't read his lovely short essay, Thoughts on American Campuses, I encourage you to do that. Just Google it, take 15 minutes. It's about 8 pages, and it's really, really lovely and talks about really what we're trying to do here on Vanderbilt's campus. Now, also by way of stepping back, and to echo a few of the points that the Chancellor made at the beginning, here you see the main campus of Vanderbilt University, today at approximately 335 acres. But Vanderbilt doesn't reside in a vacuum. It's not a bubble, even though we sometimes talk about the Vanderbilt bubble or we talk about the Magnolia Curtain. We reside, importantly, in a broader local and regional context. Okay, so here's Vanderbilt kind of zooming out a little bit, very close to downtown, nestled right here in Midtown. And then, oh, look, all around us, there is just an absolutely amazing amount of development going on in Nashville. I've been here for about 5.5 years, and I've seen entire neighborhoods just completely transformed, in some cases in really positive ways, in other cases in much more, I think, troubling ways. And we'll talk about that as we move forward in this presentation. But I think a key point here is that Vanderbilt cannot and should not remain insular to all of this. We can't just say, let the city change, let the city thrive. We're sitting here in our 335 acres and we can just watch things happen. We need to participate in the dynamism of this city. We need to be a leader, and we need to be proactive in finding win-win opportunities that accrue to the value and the mission of Vanderbilt, while also helping the city and the community thrive. And I think this planning process offers us a great opportunity to do that. I think a couple more points about why this work right now is so important is because, A, we actually have a really well-articulated academic strategic plan that was really authored in large part not only by our board and our leadership, but by our fabulous provost, who's also, believe it or not, a wonderful space planner, among other things. So we actually have our stated goals to which to tether our aspirations in the physical environment. Also, as people know, it's been just over a year since Vanderbilt University separated itself legally, financially, and operationally from the medical center. So here's the medical center sitting on approximately 38 acres of the university's land that we continue to own and will continue to own into the future. But the separation of the medical center, while pulled off very successfully, and has really positioned the medical center and the university for much greater success and a much greater acceleration towards our vision of really being world-class. At the same time, it gives us the opportunity to kind of step back and think about, what does it mean to be Vanderbilt University? What does that mean in terms of our land use? What does that mean in terms of our campus? And the lenses you place upon that are focused, I think, in some very different ways when you think about us as a university, not a university tethered legally and operationally to a massive regional medical center. This is a slide I've liked to show in a lot of presentations, and it's intended to demonstrate contrast. Okay, so here's Vanderbilt University, one of our beautiful buildings. That is timeless architecture. When people close their eyes and they think about beautiful parts of Vanderbilt campus, or they think about a beautiful campus anywhere in the world, I think they picture buildings like this. They picture beautiful landscapes like this. In contrast, they don't picture what was then under construction, the 800,000 square foot Ayrton Midtown Plaza at Broadway and 21st. I don't think they picture that, okay? That, to me, really stands in complete contrast to what we build and what we do here at Vanderbilt. While some of the amenities there may be seen as useful to the community, the architectural style, I have to say, is really just another example of developer-driven, ROI-driven, throwaway architecture. And we are in a really fortunate and unique position here at Vanderbilt where we have the vision and the financial wherewithal to build timeless architecture. And beyond that wherewithal, I feel really strongly that as stewards of this institution, we have the responsibility to do so. And if we do not do so, we are failing ourselves, and we are failing to extend our vision into the future for generations to come. Similarly, here you see West End Avenue, kind of a unfortunate coincidence that resides right along one of the major edges of our campus. All of that traffic, I think everybody's familiar with it. And of course, we have to acknowledge, as a leader, Vanderbilt University and its medical center are absolutely core to the economy of Nashville and the broader entirety of the region. You can see some of the statistics that demonstrate that there. So really, throughout these conversations, as Nick said, we've really tried to have a community-driven process. We've done a wide range of town halls. I've met with thousands of people, faculty, students, and staff, to really talk about what are our values? What are we driving towards? What is true north? And this is a lovely word cloud that Lee Shoup in my office developed a couple of years ago that shows, as we started these dialogues, these concepts emerging, these foundational ideas to which we have to, again, tether all of our physical and campus aspirations. this is an interesting graphic. Vanderbilt is really a campus of neighborhoods. I'm not going to get into the history of the development of the campus, but the campus was never planned, if you will, as a 330, 335 acre place. It grew over time. It started as about 75 acres, and over the decades kind of grew all the way around here. And if you're interested, go to our FutureVU website. We have an entire full-length video that explains some of the details of the history of campus planning here at Vanderbilt, what worked and what didn't work. And what's interesting is one of the key takeaways of that is what didn't work is when previous plans proposed things that were not values-driven and were not forward-thinking. But here we see this concept of knowing that we have all these different neighborhoods, how do we enhance connectivity across campus on both a north-south and an east-west set of dimensions? And these colors are actually intentional. They're kind of a very high-level concept of zoning, of what we see the uses of different parcels of our land being deployed towards. So, for instance, over here at 21st and Broadway, where the very attractive Center building today is located, as well as a lot of parking, the former site of the Corner Pub that is no longer with us, as well as the old Nashville, that's zoned in this turquoise color, and this is a really important part of our plan. Okay, Vanderbilt doesn't have any dedicated graduate housing, okay? So we have about 6,000 graduate and professional students. And 10, 20 years ago, I mean, we weren't competing for quite the same world-class caliber of graduate student. And Nashville was a lot more affordable place. So there was less of a shortage of housing that was affordable nearby the campus where our graduate students, especially our PhD students who have very intense schedules, would like to live. So as we've really studied our peer institutions, best-in-class peers tend to have graduate housing available for about 50% of their students, plus or minus, depending on the region, depending on the area. So through a very intentional process, we are working on a plan to develop this land and potentially other future sites for graduate housing. Okay, we're working closely with a variety of our deans and our provosts. We could spend an entire town hall talking about that, and we probably will, but more to come on that. That's what we envision here. These purple areas really reflect the next phase, and this is transformational. This is just so core to our strategy, the residential college environments. This really all started back with Nick as our provost. I think really promulgating a vision for a world-class undergraduate residential education here on campus that led to the establishment of the Commons, which has been transformational for the first-year experience. Then we went to Kassam, we took that down, delivered lovely Warren and more. E. Bronson Ingram College, under construction right now. That will be one of the finest buildings on our campus, architecturally and programmatically. And as many of you have heard, we have aspirations well underway to transform not only this edge of West End Avenue by removing, if you will, the Tarpley parking lot and the towers, okay, the horrendous towers. And also at the same time, taking the opportunity to acknowledge with the introduction of 3 new, really beautiful, stunning colleges here, we should look at the neighborhood, okay? Because those colleges will exist next to a neighborhood that could use some improvement and enhancement, some really making this a more park-like setting to complement the beautiful historic core. And then these red areas are really deemed as what I would call sort of mixed use. As we develop the campus in the years to come, these will be home to sites for both residential and academic activities. And connectivity, again, being key and underlying to all of this. I'm glad David's here. David Plummer, one of our architects, joined us. One of my crazy ideas that I keep prying him on is a land bridge, a high line that goes over 21st Avenue. We won't get into that, but he's giving me the thumbs up. So more to come on that. This is a high-level, very schematic, visionary view of what the campus might look like. Here you see much more well-articulated, pedestrian-centric flow and movement complemented by incremental green space that goes that north-south dimension. and then also the east-west dimension. There's that potential conceptual pedestrian land bridge in an area, Peabody, that is under, right now, actually intense study for some renovation, transformation, and other kind of improvement. So that's kind of a very high-level introduction of what FutureVU is all about. Some of the most powerful and meaningful conversations that I had over the course of the last year were with students and faculty from the disabled community. Okay, what's it like for me to be on this campus while you're talking about all these different things? What do we mean by accessibility? Right? We're not just talking about people in a wheelchair. There's a whole array of conditions that we have to be really cognizant of. And we were very deliberate in thinking about this as we developed our guiding principles for FutureVU. I mean, we said, like, if you want to know where you're going, you have to know, well, if you want to get to where you're going, you have to know where you're headed. And these guiding principles are intended to really articulate in words, in this case, what we mean by our vision here. So I'm not going to read these, but this provides a framework to which we tether our plans around accessibility in this particular case. So with this in mind, and after a lot of input from the community last year, we realized we have a lot of work to do on this front. We have a lot of progress to make. And accessibility on university campuses is challenging, right? If I said to the Chancellor, Nick, we have to fix everything and make this not just ADA compliant, but beyond that, I'd be asking for a check in the range of, I don't even know how many billions of dollars, right? We have a wide range of vintages of buildings. We have a really beautiful, but in some cases, challenging topography that makes movement across the campus, in some cases, more difficult. We have a lot of parking on campus that disrupts flow at a pedestrian level, et cetera, et cetera. So with that in mind, we've established an accessibility advisory task force, and my wonderful colleague Mike Perez, our Chief Facilities Officer, is actually going to join me in this part of the presentation and talk a little bit about what we're doing here. I will tell you that I am extremely bullish about what we can do here and the positive effect that it can have on the campus. He's going to tell you a little bit about this. We're even going to show you, I think, a really inspirational video about the work that we did to get this underway last summer. So
thanks, Eric. Thanks, Eric. And good morning, everybody. Eric is correct. Most universities are challenged because they are stately, have been around for decades and centuries, and resulting from that and all this beautiful architecture, most of which constructed before there were standards or accessibility standards. They've now been applied, and I would like to reinforce the fact that here at Vanderbilt, with our university architect Keith Loiso and company, we are doing well as regards new construction, so that the Vanderbilt standards not only meet the ADA requirements, we exceed them. The desire that we have is that, as the Chancellor mentioned, we want to make this as barrier-free a campus as possible. And so everything that we construct goes and exceeds the ADA standards or ADAC standards, which I think is commendable. Then, as it regards what we're doing with this Advisory Accessibility Task Force, we in facilities are the stewards for the built environment, and we take that seriously. We have developed a plan in which we are able to better remove barriers from this built environment. But as we considered this, we thought we're not the only experts in the room. We know that there is a community out there who is very familiar with the challenges that exist for the disabled community, and that disabled community is really broad. It isn't just the physically disabled. It'd be vision, hearing, and many other elements that, as you can imagine, are sometimes challenged by the built environment. So we said, let's reach out in the spirit of transparency, which is really important here at Vanderbilt and with FutureVU. We wanted to reach out to partners that have additional experience of which we could use, so that they could help guide how we start working at making Vanderbilt even less barrier, or have less barriers here for the community. So you can see at the bottom of the screen, we have enlisted a number of the campus community, delighted to have a mixture of faculty, staff, and students, all of which are really, really intelligent and passionate individuals. But what we will be doing with this group, as is noted here in the charge, is that they will help us. So it's facilities that have the expertise with respect to construction and design and the like, but we will utilize their knowledge of what occurs on campus and in some cases what occurs to a disabled individual, and with that input will help us prioritize what improvements we ought to pursue here at Vanderbilt as we start chipping away and removing these barriers. So we have enlisted David Plummer and Centrec Architects to help us as we consider these design opportunities for these improvements. We have had 2 meetings already, and in these meetings we are identifying the important criteria and priorities that guides us through how these improvements will occur. So as for instance, you think about entries into some of our great historic buildings, and the primary entrance has typically flights of steps or stairs cases in some regards. And in those instances, they are not hospitable to the disabled community. And so the task force will help us prioritize front entry, fully accessible, as a for instance, that really is more so important than maybe a side or a backdoor entrance. But they will help us define these priorities, identify criteria by which we will then assemble these lists of improvements that will be done on a yearly basis. The other thing that has occurred here at Vanderbilt with the Public Utility Commission, which is a body that provides annual funding for infrastructure, is that we are committing a source of funds every year towards these improvements. And so as this task force helps us identify what these improvements will be, then we'll have the requisite funding in which we can start chipping away at the challenges that exist on campus. You know, Eric, you're not too far off when you talk about we trying to remove all the barriers and it may cost billions of dollars. It will cost millions of dollars, but by having a structure, by having a game plan, by dealing with those challenges, those barriers that have the highest priority, we'll focus on those initially. We have funding in which we can attack them in a logical and comprehensive fashion, and ways in which we can, again, make this as barrier-free a campus as possible.
Yeah, Mike, you can stay up here. This work really got started last summer. And I think this
Over
is
the summer, we performed an inventory of accessibility features and concerns for all interior and exterior campus spaces.
Our goal was to focus less on ADA compliance and more on universal design principles in order to guide plans to make Vanderbilt's campus more accessible for everyone.
Using a web form accessed on our iPads, we recorded the issues we found and their locations to create a database listing the locations, notes, and photo files associated with all items collected.
We identified accessible entrances for all buildings and noted where they were not clearly marked or visible, in addition to labeling if the door was power operated or manual.
In addition to checking for automatic buttons and doors, we checked the timing of these doors. Here at Wilson Hall is an example of improper timing.
We also checked that the buttons on these doors were fully functioning.
When a building offered an alternate accessible entrance, such as a lift, we measured the lift dimensions and noted if it required assistance from a building administrator to operate.
We measured the dimensions of every elevator in each building to ensure that they were large enough for a turning wheelchair, as well as checking that the door opening was wide enough. Additionally, we noted when elevator buttons lacked braille or raised text. If an elevator required outside assistance to operate, we made a note of it. The Peabody Library elevator cannot be used without the desk attendant's key. One elevator on the first floor of the Divinity Library opens up to a 20-pound door that must be opened to exit.
If a door wasn't automatic, we waited to see if it was below the required level of 5 pounds. This is important because it ensures that any door can be opened by anyone.
Additionally, we measured the heights of the braille and raised text on signs to ensure that they can be easily reached. We noticed that many signs were above the range of the required 48 to 60 inches.
We look for doorknobs because some people have motor impairments that make it difficult to turn them.
For a water fountain to be accessible, it needs to have room underneath for a wheelchair and be easily operable. Some older water fountains do not meet these requirements, such as those in Mayborn.
Accessible seating was often located only in the back of lecture halls with no path to the front of the room. We made a note when this was the case.
We looked at several different areas in bathrooms, such as the size of the path from the stalls to the sink, heights of soap and towel dispensers, amount of space underneath the sink, and presence of a fire alarm. If a bathroom had an accessible stall, we ensured it had enough space for a turning wheelchair and checked for handrails. Restrooms without any accessible stall were recorded.
Around campus there are actually a surprising number of showers, and we went around documenting them and finding which ones were accessible and which ones were not.
Several paths around campus have stairs that are not easily circumvented. For those areas, we look for the accessible path that would take someone from the bottom to the top of the staircase without using the stairs. This path would sometimes take the person completely out of the way of the staircase, such as the accessible path for the staircase between Central and Divinity, which we measured to be 2,195 feet. Most staircases did not require such an extreme distance to avoid, but those that do would benefit from signage designating where to go to avoid the stairs.
Blue lights and emergency phones that were too high, located in the grass, or blocked by the curb were marked as inaccessible using the GPS units.
Crosswalks and intersections should provide audible warnings, detectable warnings, or a combination of the two that alert someone that they are about to enter traffic or that it is safe to cross. We checked crossings on campus and marked which intersections lacked them.
By scheduling several night walks, we checked lighting conditions on campus and identified lights that were out in areas where the darkness presented an accessibility concern.
Curb cuts are an important accessibility feature for people in wheelchairs. They allow wheelchairs to get on and off a curb without additional assistance. Using the GPS units, we documented the locations of all curb cuts. Because there's no documented map of benches on campus, we uploaded the location of every bench we came across to the GIS.
This data will be used to prioritize the issues and determine our campus's needs for accessibility. In the future, it will also be used to create a map of accessible features and issues so all individuals can successfully navigate campus.
So this was an effort done by 9 students this past summer, led by 2 Vanderbilt students, an undergraduate, Katie Kobridge, in computer sciences, I believe, and then a professional student, Peabody, Karen Brown. And they were wonderful, and they acquired thousands of points of data, of which the task force will be using, of which the architect will be using as a basis by which we develop these improvement projects. So we're well underway. We will have this list of priorities identified probably this winter, and then we'll be implementing these improvements starting this spring and summer.
Yeah, I think that's great work, Mike. Thank you for that overview. And one thing I'll just emphasize before we go on is the use of technology in all of this is absolutely tantamount. So having all of the exact geographic locations of instances of barriers or opportunities in our GIS gives us the ability to have, for instance, an app that people could use to say, I would like to go from room A on the 6th floor of MRB 3 over to Kirkland Hall, and these are my conditions that I face. What is the best way to get there? Those are the kinds of things that having this strong base of data and information will enable us to do. And we've had some great partnerships, too, with our colleagues, not only from communications, but from VUIT in figuring out the best way to organize and manage and make sustainable and easily updatable all of this information. So more to come on that as the year unfolds, but a very, very exciting project, and it was great. I mean, the people that worked on this project over the summer to really get us started are the same people we talked to last year. We kind of said, like, you're passionate about this, what are you doing this summer? We have an idea, and that's where we're headed. Now I'm going to toggle over to another topic, one of my very favorites, and one that the community is always deeply interested and engaged in. Once again, I'm going to start with a couple of our guiding principles about FutureVU. Again, when you close your eyes and you think about what makes Vanderbilt or any university campus a beautiful place, I tend to believe that you picture an accessible, a pedestrian-centric, park-like setting. And that is what makes Vanderbilt distinctive. That is something we need to preserve, something we need to further, something we need to leverage. And you can see here we assert that Vanderbilt is and must be a walkable and sustainable campus. So those are kind of true north on some of the areas that really guide our thinking around transportation and mobility. This is a sad truth. Okay, we have 22,000 parking spots on our campus. Okay, now of course many of those are attributable to our major medical center, but we have 82 acres of parking. Okay, that's 25% of our land. Parking is actually quite expensive. It's expensive to build. It's even more expensive to build if it's above ground structured parking. It's even more expensive to build if you go below ground, especially given the limestone that we face if we ever want to dig here in Nashville. And this is really, if you apply this $200 to $300 a square foot metric to 82 acres of land, what you're sitting on is an opportunity value that's north of $1 billion. Okay, so this question here, that's really rhetorical. Is this the highest and best use of our precious land? No, it's not. Okay, we want to use our land for things that are directly in support of our mission of teaching and research and learning. Okay, and here's another, I think, really fascinating statistic. Everybody says, and I have conversations all the time, well, this is terrible. We don't have enough parking. I don't have anywhere to park. You know, and you realize we actually sent people around as part of this, and we studied utilization of our parking. Okay, and what they mean when they say there's no parking, what they really mean is when I come to work at 8 in the morning, I cannot park right next to my office. That makes me angry. That's, I think, what people mean. Guess what? A little bit further down the road, or over here or over there, there's parking. Okay, and some of our least utilized parking tends to be the furthest from the center of campus. So you start to get into a dialogue around, well, how do you get people to utilize that parking when parking's necessary? How do you help circulate people around the campus more effectively than we do today? And frankly, how do you encourage health and wellness by having people actually walk and experience a little bit more at the pedestrian level this beautiful campus of ours? So the question really becomes, how do you liberate this land for higher uses? And how do you do that responsibly? And that leads into a really broad-based and complicated set of questions and dilemmas that we opined on at some length last year at a town hall that the Chancellor and I held on transportation and mobility. And shortly I'm going to give you a little bit of an update on the efforts therein and where we're headed with the help of some of our faculty and others. I think this is an interesting visualization. So here's Vanderbilt campus, and using our same GIS technology that we talked about earlier, in an anonymized way, we are able to know where every graduate student, every faculty member, every staff member who works at Vanderbilt University, where they live. Okay? Like, where do they live? Each of these dots represents where somebody who works at Vanderbilt lives. And then you can do some other interesting things. You might say, well, let's study this from the perspective of, say, income ranges. Let's attach a color, and it's a little bit hard to read, but let's attach a color that represents whether a person earns, say, 0 to 50,000, 50 to 100,000, 100 to 150, and on and on. And when you run a regression analysis between how much someone makes and how far they live from campus, the R squared, for those of you who are into stats, is like a 0.99. There is a very, very, very tight and high correlation between how much people make and how far they live from campus. The less people make, the further, on average, that they live from campus. And this situation is being exacerbated by everything that's going on in Nashville. Right? So Nashville is developing. It's getting more and more expensive. Sure, there are all kinds of new units and things close to campus, but one bedrooms at the Ayrton Plaza, what are they, Keith? $1,800 a month, $2,000 a month? I mean, our graduate students aren't living there. I mean, they can't afford to on a $28,000 a year stipend. Our most vulnerable workers who need to be here at work, who are making hourly wages, are being forced to move further and further away. I think one of the most powerful examples of gentrification in this whole city, and I drive around a lot and just observe and look, is if you go between South Boulevard, 8th Avenue, 12 South, and Edge Hill. That entire community has been essentially razed and turned into, the tall skinnies going for $1 million a piece, when before you actually had a community of more modest economic means. And where did everybody go? Well, they're moving further and further away. And the dilemma becomes worse, because when you start to superimpose on these maps, as you see here, transportation infrastructure, where do the train lines go? Where do the bus lines go? Where are the park and rides? You start to realize, okay, our most vulnerable workers are living further and further away for affordability reasons, and those areas are not well served by public transportation. So this becomes even a social issue. We know the mayor right now is giving a large public address on the city's aspirations around transportation and mobility. This project has afforded us the opportunity to get to know her and a lot of key members of her team, and we're actually partnering with them very closely on our aspirations around this. This is the textbook example of a hard problem to solve, but where I'm very bullish that the innovative culture of Vanderbilt will help us make a huge difference in conjunction and in partnership with the city of Nashville, and I think this is extraordinarily important. I also think what's interesting is if I were talking like this 10 or 15 years ago, that's when the pitchforks and the torches start to come out. I like to say, I go to meetings and people say, raise your hand if you want a more green, beautiful, sustainable campus, and people say, me, me, me. And you say, well, to have that, would you be willing to take an alternative form of transportation to work? Would you be willing to park further away? Would you ride your bike? And that's when people start to, their hearts palpitate, and they say, well, that all sounded good until you asked me to change my habits, okay? And therein lies the conundrum. But today, because of all of these things listed here, we're at a series of societal and technological inflection points that enable us to change the tenor of the dialogue. We can all posit when self-driving cars will be the norm. There are those who predict that's within the next 5 years. Some will say the next 10 years, but they already exist, and they are coming, and they will have an impact on things. The Internet of Things, the ability to connect what will be estimated at 50 billion online devices across the world by 2020. The ability to connect those and create sort of an ambient intelligence that allows things to talk to each other, not just serve you as an individual, but a larger grid to provide information. That is happening. Millennials, so people under 30, I think are 7.2 times more likely to take transportation than people over 60. Okay, car ownership among millennials is significantly lower. It has gone down 18%. In the last 10 years. Things are changing. Smart cities. We have a variety of faculty here who are applying smart cities technology in a whole range of ways, but this is a way to create a technological infrastructure for your campus and your cities that enables you to handle things like transportation demand in a much more seamless and efficient way. And of course, underneath all this are data and analytics, and oh yes, the advent of rideshare. A graphic I don't think I brought today shows Uber usage across campus. So every year the students, we talk with the students and we say, what would you like to use your Commodore card for with your Commodore Cash off campus? And they might say, how about Chili's? How about Qdoba? A couple years ago was, how about Uber? Okay, so we enabled that so that students using their own dollars when they took an Uber could swipe with their Commodore card. And one of the interesting quid pro quos for us doing was that we suddenly were given data by Uber that could show us, A, how many rides were students taking and where were people being picked up and dropped off here on campus, right? What were the destination and origins here on campus to inform where we should have ride-sharing staging areas. And the usage of ride-share it's extraordinary. I think it's 2,000 rides a week. And this is just on Uber, and this is just using students' own cash. So how do we capitalize on that opportunity? And this is something I've been working with Robert Grishevsky, who's here, and others on through the Wondery. How do we assert our buying power as an institution and partner in the best and safest ways with a third party like a Lyft to help fill in some of the cracks in transportation needs that assuage the need to begin with for single occupancy vehicles here on campus. So all these things make this a period of change. So after we talked about this as a community last year, we solicited from the community anybody who would like to participate in much deeper work. And we actually got about 100 students, faculty, and staff to, if you will, sign up and join us. And over at the Wondery, throughout the course of the second semester last year, we broke into work groups that really took a deep look at all these things. All these things are interrelated, they're all complicated, they're all fraught with change management issues, etc. And we also worked, as you can see here, with our Vanderbilt student government, which has been a really proactive and helpful partner in all of our thinking. So where did that lead us? This is a high-level kind of thematic summary of the recommendations that came out of all that work. You can see here connectivity, again, tying to our core principles. Governance. How do you orchestrate and manage better approaches to transportation demand management? Accessibility, communication, analysis. A lot of things here. And again, moving the dial on this, not only, it's fundamental to us unlocking the potential of our campus so that if we can come up with alternates to the single occupancy vehicle, we can liberate some of that precious land for higher purposes than parking lots. So here you see a very detailed slide of the wide range of tactical recommendations. Now, progress on implementing many of these is underway now, but I'd be remiss not to mention a couple of our guests and my now dear colleagues who are in the audience, Professor Craig Phillip and Professor Mark Abkowitz. Interestingly, Craig participated heavily and in a super helpful way in all of our transportation dialogues. And as we were pulling together all of these recommendations late last spring, Craig showed up at my office and introduced me to Dr. Abkowitz, who explained that, you know what, Eric, everything you guys are talking about in terms of transportation, there may be an opportunity to partner with the city on this and to actually seek some external funding to help catalyze and make this happen. I don't know if you guys, I'd welcome you to say anything you'd like about that or nothing at all, but this, to me, has been one of the great examples of partnerships. So as an administration, we did not just kind of sit back, like Nick said, and sort of close the door and say, okay, we've figured this out, now let's just go tell everybody. We actually said, you know what, there are a lot of people right here on this campus who know a lot more about these issues than I ever will. Let us work with them and harness their energies and their brain power to help make this work. So Craig and Mark, anything to add?
We're both members of the Civil Environmental Engineering Department here at Vanderbilt. More importantly, we're both integral parts of a center here at Vanderbilt called Vector, the Vanderbilt Center for Transportation and Operational Resiliency. So we've been working on issues that Eric and the Chancellor have been alluding to. And in the course of the various research projects that we do for a variety of different sponsors, local, federal, state, and so forth, we became aware of a program called CMAQ, CMAQ, which stands for Congestion Management and Air Quality. And it turns out that this is a federal program that gives money to various states who happen to have areas within the state that are considered non-attainment from the standpoint of congestion and air quality. And I guess as luck would have it, the area that Vanderbilt is located in qualifies. And it turns out that it's a fairly substantial grant program that doesn't really have the type of applications that are filed by different entities that comes even remotely to this vision that Eric and the Chancellor have painted. So we sat down with the folks at TDOT and explained to them what we had in mind. And not only could they encourage us to apply, but it was almost the perfect storm, because it turns out that the city of Nashville had received funding through the same program the year before, which has started their whole process in going down the smart streets direction. And it also turns out that even though Vanderbilt is an academic campus, when you look at it through the lens of the city or the state, we're the largest employer in Nashville and a major activity center. So if we can develop a comprehensive plan that focuses on accessibility, mobility, and sustainability, and we can show how that works, particularly not just with the physical infrastructure, but all of the cyber-physical networking that we would put into the infrastructure, that would be just a huge success for everyone involved, and would make not only Vanderbilt look like a leader, but also the city and the state. So we have made that application. It embodies a number of the things that Eric may be talking about later on, in terms of different transportation options. I don't know how much you want me to talk about.
We're not going to get too into that today,
but it's a combination of just about everything. Express buses, van pools, transporting people on golf carts around campus, Uber and Lyft, smart cars, you name it. And we're basically, what's that? We've asked for it. We've asked for it anyhow. And we've also asked to put up all kinds of sensors and so forth throughout the campus and also throughout the corridors that people come in on, so that we have the data analytics that Eric was alluding to, in order to not only measure what kind of improvement we can make, but also to continue to make the system better in the future.
Thanks, and this has been really a great partnership, so stay tuned on this, much more to come as well. I'm going to talk about sustainability. This is a really big topic, really important topic, really interweaves itself with the transportation dialogue we just had. And once again, I'll draw your attention here to two more of the FutureVU guiding principles that are particularly relevant to our efforts and aspirations around sustainability. Okay, and again, this is another example of where Vanderbilt already is and can be even more of a leader, not only in terms of an institutional and university environment, but has deep opportunities to partner with the city and community to really create a better environment here in Nashville and across the region. So this is an interesting graphic. One of the things that occurred to me as we were having dialogues about sustainability was, who are the groups, who are the faculty, who are the parties here on campus who concern themselves with such topics? And here you can see there are an awful lot of circles on this. So this is my graphic where I say there are 1,000 flowers blooming. We have student groups, we have faculty groups, we have operational groups, we have a sustainability and environmental management office capably led by Andrea George, who's here today. But you'd find out, you'd sort of figure out that, oh, this group is looking at solar, and that group's looking at solar. And these guys, I'm walking down the street and they're pushing geothermal on me. We've got other people doing smart cities. We have this committee, we have that committee. So that's good. There's some energy. There's things happening. Flowers blooming everywhere, but not really a bouquet. So how do we, in the context of our physical environment, start to create some focus and some opportunity to really do things not in an ad hoc way, but in an intentional, deliberate, and strategic way guided by a vision? So most of you, I believe, have probably heard of this concept of the triple bottom line. So kind of in corporate life, you think about your P&L, your profit and loss. You know, you take your depreciation, you take your taxes, put your capital expenses in, and you get a profit and loss. And you say, like, great, I'm trying to maximize profit for my shareholders. And one of my favorite examples would be like the mine, you know, the strip mine. Found a bunch of gold this year, that's great. We let a bunch of really bad chemicals into the environment, polluted all the groundwater, and everybody in the community is really sick. The cost of that, societally, socially, economically, that's never in the equation. That doesn't show up in the P&L. It might later if there's a successful lawsuit, but a lot of those profits for companies like that are plowed right back into defense, okay, to assuage that. So the concept of having a triple bottom line that thinks about the totality of the impact of decisions and directions that companies and businesses take, I think, is a really important philosophy. This really started in the mid-90s, and in essence, it really empowers and requires companies to take a longer-term view of what they're doing by incorporating social and economic benefits and implications of their efforts. This is an interesting graphic. As part of our work on FutureVU, working with a third party, Atelier 10, we started to ask ourselves what I think are some pretty big questions, questions we need to interrogate much further with our community. So lots of universities across the country, a lot of our peer institutions have stated goals around greenhouse gas reduction or even carbon neutrality. It's actually pretty attractive these days for universities to say by 2050 we will be carbon neutral. Now we haven't said that yet. And meanwhile, we've been making all kinds of great progress, and I might even have Andrea talk a little bit about some of the things we're doing on greenhouse gas reduction, where we've been tracking and steadily chipping away. But we have not yet said, okay, we will be carbon neutral by 2050, or we'll reduce our carbon footprint by 80%. Should we say that? I'm not sure. I think this is a dialogue for the institution, but what this analytical graphic represents is, what if we did want to say something like that as an institution? What would it take to get there? And this is a scenario where you sort of say, well, you have to look at how is your campus going to grow, right? Because more buildings tend to mean more emissions, more energy consumption, so you have to factor that in. But you can implement building measures. You can implement smart control systems and technology. You can do things proactively to your central plant to make it more efficient, to use better kinds of energy, like we did several years ago when we got rid of coal through Nick's actual vision and moved to natural gas. You can have a renewables strategy around solar and other kinds of renewables. A transportation strategy that we just talked quite a bit about. And if you take a long-term view, you can start to see, wow, you could really start to make a dent in all of these things, particularly from the perspective of the built environment and transportation. Right now, I've had a lot of dialogues with colleagues. We have a great new communications vice chancellor, Steve Ertl, who's in the back and has a deep interest in these topics. And I think one of the things he and I keep talking about, and we talk with the chancellor and our colleagues about, is, you know, this just doesn't happen. You don't just do things behind the scenes. It requires, to really make progress on these kinds of issues, a set of values and a set of commitments from all of us to really do the right thing. And we need to keep talking about this. We need to keep making progress. And just wanted to show you the kinds of frameworks that we're studying. So we said, okay, we have this framework. Now what? What do we do next? What are some of the tangible steps that we can take to, again, harness the quote-unquote energy, pun intended, of our community to really move things forward? And this is where I'm going to turn it over to Mike again, who's going to talk about two, I think, really important studies that are going to enable Vanderbilt to be strategic about how we move along a graphic like the one I just showed.
Thanks, Eric. So in that previous graph, it noted those horizontal lines and we're trending the right way. And just for some context, there is 19 million square feet on our campus, and that includes the medical center, but our utilities are supporting that. 19 million square feet. We have, since the year in which we call our baseline in measuring our emissions and the like, we have grown as an institution by about 4.2%, just in square footage, to get to that 19 million square feet. We have reduced, even though we grew, we have reduced energy consumption by about 3.4%, which is good. Again, on that previous graph where you see things are really trying to trend down, that's really good, but it's incremental. We've also reduced energy cost as a result of that, even though electricity costs are rising. So we're managing things well. So You know, the good folks in facilities and plant ops like Mark Petty and Mitch Lampley and others are doing a good job, but it's incremental. And some of that, I think, is in large part because, as Eric and the Chancellor have alluded to, they're done in vacuums, in areas in which they're in charge of, which is great. But now what we want to do, is there an opportunity to maybe take a big chunk? Is there a way in which we take these horizontal trends, which are good, and make them more dramatic? Is it there? And so Blue Sky, as the name is intentional, suggests, okay, look at our energy strategy and take all the constraints away. Be visionary. What can we do here at Vanderbilt University as it regards generation, distribution, and use all together? Not, you know, because typically in years past we'd look at, well, let's look at a newer technology for our chiller plant. Let's look at a newer technology for how we generate steam, et cetera, et cetera. And those were done in a vacuum, which are good, and they contributed to that horizontal, you know, trending down. But if you integrate all of this and you look at how you generate, you look at how you distribute, you look at various technologies, you look at what may be occurring down the road that hasn't gotten here yet, you look at renewables. What are those opportunities for the institution? And resulting from that, is there any one in which we can really take a major step forward with reduction in greenhouse gas emissions? And by the way, that equates to economics as well. Because when you can do that and you can become more efficient, then it does contribute to that triple bottom line, and we are lowering our expense. We spend $32 million a year just in utilities. The primary commodities are electricity and natural gas. We have done well of recent in that we have cogeneration on campus. We have, so of the electricity consumption, about 22% we produce ourselves with the cogen turbines, which is fabulous. But what Blue Sky will do is to engage a consultant, work with our facilities team, and not unlike what I mentioned earlier with accessibility, we are inviting and have already reached out to faculty, staff, and students who will work with us in advisory capacity on a committee that will anticipate all of these wonderful visions for the future here at Vanderbilt University. And once we understand that, then we can implement incremental improvements and adjustments within our utilities strategy in alignment with a longer-term vision. So we are issuing the RFP this month. We expect to have the consultant on board later in the month, if not this month and early in November. And then sometime, probably in calendar year 2018, we will have the report by the committee and the consultants for an opportunity to think differently. Controls, smart controls in buildings, not unlike transportation, but the same thing applies for the built environment. How we distribute, how we generate. All of those things, part of a package that we're excited about, and with that, then we contribute to the triple bottom line from a social, environmental, and economic perspective. You want to keep on going here? You get the clicker? So then, renewable energy is a major component of Blue Sky as well, but a nuance that is occurring here is that there are federal tax credits associated with solar and wind production. These tax credits sunset starting in 2019 and 2020 respectively for solar and wind. So because we knew that window was closing, which as you put your economics hat on and you try to make it pencil, and as we consider whether we own it or some other creative business arrangement in which we can secure lower utility electricity, we wanted to not let this opportunity go by, and we miss it. So resulting from that, and just ahead of Blue Sky, we have implemented this renewable energy study. It's currently underway. As a matter of fact, we do have, let me look, can you advance it one more, please, Eric? We do have an advisory committee for this group. And again, you can see it's well populated by our facilities organization and a number of distinguished faculty members, staff, and students. We have had already one meeting, have another exciting meeting this afternoon, and I really am excited about it. But we are challenging the way we think about solar vis-a-vis not necessarily on campus, on site, on roofs, but the possibility of it being distributed. Is there an opportunity for either solar and or wind to have an array or a system off campus, outside the city, beyond the state boundaries? Think big. So what does that do for us? Could that be an opportunity, and how does that then fit into the blue sky? That effort is...
This is another great example of Vanderbilt in action. So it was really over the summer, Mike Vandenberg and Jeff McDonald, two really passionate members of our community, started to approach Mike and I. We had a series of breakfast meetings, and they were educating us on all those solar issues that you were describing so well. And of course, they're like, we should do this, we should do this. And I kind of took Mike aside and I said, I think this sounds like a really interesting opportunity, but I don't know how to place this in a broader context without some further help. I feel like I'm getting, as I like to say, ad hoc. You know, one day some smart person is going to say it's all about solar, someone else is going to say where are the wind turbines. And these are probably all good things, but it really forced us to step back and say there is merit to looking at this, but it's not just solar. It's a renewable energy study so we can understand more of the art of the possible and what's going to happen in the future, and then that will feed in as one input into this blue sky study. So, but again, a great reflection of the Vanderbilt community where people, you know, I'm thrilled. People came to us and said, let's talk, and we're running with that.
Correct.
Oh, okay, great. So I'm going to just quickly... We're here till 11:30, and I definitely want to leave time for dialogue and questions, so I'm going to talk through relatively quickly a couple of other aspects of progress that we are making on the sustainability front. So as part of our work on FutureVU, we have a framework for a sustainable purchasing policy. This hasn't been implemented yet on an institutional scale, but we have a framework for this, and we're hopeful to make an announcement later this year outlining these kinds of aspirations about finding environmentally preferable products and suppliers, and also preferably that have a positive economic impact for Vanderbilt and contribute to that triple bottom line. Also the notion of a proposed green cleaning policy. We use a lot of different kinds of chemicals in our built environment, some of which are not so healthy for us to be around all the time. And this is a burgeoning area of innovation in the marketplace. How do we capitalize on that and have a policy and set of approaches that really enable us to do, quote unquote, green cleaning here on campus, something we're really investigating. LEED. This is something we've been at for quite some time, and with really the leadership of Keith Luiso and the facilities team, we truly have distinguished ourselves as a leader in terms of LEED. I think as this important statement shows, we had the first LEED certified building here in Nashville, and some other time we could do a whole town hall on the history of sustainability efforts here in Nashville, nationally and globally, and how what Vanderbilt has been doing kind of fits into that. But these are the kinds of things that LEED measures, and just as a standard, we always aspire in new buildings and significant renovations to achieve high levels of LEED certification. It is just the right thing to do, and is a great example of something that contributes to a triple bottom line. It's not just the right thing to do socially and environmentally, but it actually makes, in terms of the life cycle cost of facilities, great economic sense. So these are examples of all of our gold and silver and otherwise certified LEED projects. Didn't we just get a recent one? The Recreations, the Rec Center. Just finally, retroactively, a couple years after it opened, finally came through with its LEED certification. We're very, very proud of that. And that's a lot of progress in a period of, 10 years or so since we really began on this front. Now here's an area that is really interesting. A couple years ago, the Chancellor referred one of our board members to me who knew something about well building certification and said, could you look into this? And we did. Some of you may recall about 1.5 years ago, we brought a national leader on the well building concept here to campus, and about 50 of us got together and we talked about what well building certification is. The best way I like to look at it, it's like a nutrition label for your building. LEED certification has everything to do with energy consumption, building systems, efficiency, etc., and that's really important. This is kind of like when I'm a human being inside this place, what is it like? What's the air quality? Do I walk around? Are there staircases I'm encouraged to take through the architecture and design, or am I always taking the elevator? What's the water quality? What about fitness? Are there opportunities for health and well-being within this? So this is a relatively new standard that's now been adopted on an international level, and there are millions and millions of square feet that have been quote-unquote well-building certified. And we said to ourselves, should we adopt this? And we did, we did a big study. Here you can see kind of a scorecard of all the different things that you need to look at, and not surprisingly, to, if you will, retrofit a vintage building to well standards is quite difficult. But there still may be certain elements or themes that we promulgate across all of our physical plant. But when you look forward and you plan new buildings and extensions to existing buildings, you can think more proactively about this. Today there is one well-certified space in the entirety of Nashville. It's the Lend-Lease floor at the Capstar building at the Gulch. It's really a quite remarkable space. And when you visit that space, as a human being at the human scale, you feel very nurtured. There are a lot of plants, there is excellent lighting, there is an environment that creates collaboration and connectivity in a really healthy way. And again, kudos to our Dean of Nursing and our campus planning team, because as we put the School of Nursing expansion in place, which is now underway, this will be our first well building on campus. And I am really excited about it. It'll be the first well building in Nashville. So just as we had the first LEED certified building in Nashville in 2007, we'll have the first fully certified well building, not just a floor of a building, but really a 30,000 square foot building expansion here in the School of Nursing. And this will serve really as an on-campus laboratory for further developments as we move forward in the built environment. This is kind of a fun one. Oh, we have a little time lapse going at the bottom. One of the things that a lot of people don't know is that we have green roofs here on campus. Some people may be on the second or third floor of Rand and you look out towards the historic core and the Arboretum and you see that green roof. That's a recent thing. This little time lapse that's playing at the bottom shows the implementation of that green roof. Do people know that the Kassam courtyard is actually, it's a green roof. So there's actually parking underneath there. I still don't know why we did that, but we wanted to have a green roof, I guess, Keith. So that's a green roof. The Medical Center Plaza here, okay, over by the Old Baum Pond, a green roof. The Engineering and Science Building, here we were very intentional about including a green roof in ESB. And then this area in front of nursing is another green roof. And so these are what we like to call hidden pockets of sustainability. This is something I am really intrigued by, that the facilities team has really challenged myself and others to think about. So we've talked about LEED. LEED was the big hot thing 20 years ago. It's still really, really important and well established. Well building standards are kind of on the leadership edge of facilities management in terms of sustainability. And then there's this notion of the living building. I'm going to be in Seattle next week, and I'm going to go see the Bullitt Center while I'm there, which is a living building. But the idea here is not just to have an efficient and effective and well-managed and healthy building, but to have a building that actually has gives back, if you will, to the environment, has a positive contribution. Now, we have actually a couple of living building ambassadors. Paul Marshall and others on our team who are actively participating in citywide dialogues with the mayor's office and people from the architectural and planning community to contemplate what will it take to make Nashville a living, building, ready city. And I say that's great. We need to think about that very, very broadly, another partnership opportunity. Could we, though, in the meantime, consider potentially a living building here on campus? And I would posit that the answer is yes. Now, we don't have any plans underway, but this is another thing that I'm really excited about and that we are considering. So with that, I'm going to stop talking and really just open it up for questions and dialogue. Gives you a little flavor of several of the things we're working on our FutureVU efforts. And before I take questions, just once again, thank you all for taking the time to come here and participate in this.